Hello and welcome back to English with Lucy. Today I've got a grammar video for you. I know it's been a while since I did a grammar video, but a lot of you have asked for a video on modal verbs, so here it is. Today I'm going to introduce you to modal verbs. I'm going to tell you the rules, how to use them, when to use them. Do note though that there are a lot of different situations in which you need to use different modal verbs, and it would be impossible for me to go through them all. So this is an introduction, and hopefully you will leave the lesson feeling a lot more comfortable when using modal verbs. Let's get started. So firstly, what are modal verbs? Well, they are part of a larger category called auxiliary verbs. And these are verbs that add meaning to another verb. Now, modal verbs are special because they follow a strict set of rules and they're used in a very specific way. I'm going to talk about the 9 modal verbs today. Don't get them confused with the semi-modals that only follow some of the modal verb rules. Now, if I asked you right now to tell me the 9 modal verbs, would you be able to tell me them? If you can, that's great, but for those who can't, I've got a really easy way of remembering them. We've got 3 M's, 2 W's, 2 C's and 2 S's. So when you write them out in a pattern, it's much easier to remember them all. So we've got the 3 M's. We've got must, might and may. We've then got the 2 W's, will and would. We've then got the 2 C's, can and could. And then the 2 S's, shall and should. Remember, will and would are special. In spoken and informal language, they can be contracted. So will can turn into apostrophe double L, I will, I'll, and would can turn into apostrophe D. So we have she would, she'd. Now, the majority of these modal verbs express different meaning depending on the context. So you really have to understand the sentence or question as a whole. I am going to help you with this today. Later on in the video, we can talk about the different meanings that each modal verb can express. But firstly, we need to go through the rules. What can you do with them? What can't you do with them? Without these rules, you're going to find it very difficult to use them. But the good news is that all of these rules apply to the 9 modal verbs that we're looking at in this lesson. So, rule number 1. Infinitives come after modal verbs, but without to. Okay? So, we're saying, I might eat pizza. I can play football. Rule number 2, modal verbs take no S in the third person singular. She must leave, or it might happen. Rule number 3, modal verbs do not change their form according to tense. So they've got no past form and they've got no future form. It just stays the same. So the easy way of remembering it is modal verbs don't change. They stay exactly as they are. So rule number 4, we use modal verbs in negative sentences like we do with other auxiliary verbs, i.e. without the word do. So the way we use modal verbs in negative sentences is subject, modal verb, not verb. Let's look at some examples. You must not eat my food. You must not eat my food. Or I can not speak French. I cannot speak French. So it's always in that order, just like we would with other auxiliary verbs. Now remember, you must learn the contractions for the negatives, which are used quite frequently in spoken or informal language. Might, might not, mightn't. Must, must not, mustn't. May not, no contraction. Can, cannot, can't. Could not, couldn't. Will not, won't. Would not, wouldn't. Shall not, shan't. Should not, shouldn't. Okay, so those were the negative contractions. Number 5, Easy, now we've looked at number 4. With interrogative phrases, modal verbs are used like other auxiliary verbs. Modal verb, subject, verb. Some examples. Can you help me? Can you help me? Will you let him? Will you let him? So those were the rules. Now let's have a look at the individual modal verbs and how and when we can use them. So firstly, let's look at might. Might can be used to show possibility. They might be eating lunch, or she might give us a discount. Then we have may. May can also be used to show possibility. The teacher may be late today. And it can also be used to ask for permission. May I leave now? Note that using may to ask for permission can be seen as quite formal. Then we have must. Must can be used to show probability or to make a logical assumption. She must be stuck in traffic. Must can also be used to show necessity. I must go home right now. And it can also be used to show prohibition. You must not smoke here. Then we have will. Will can be used to indicate future time. I will leave at 7 o'clock. It can also be used to make a promise or to show willingness. I will give money to charity this Christmas. It can also be used to ask a polite question. Will you help me with this, for example? Then we have would. Again, would can be used to ask a polite question. Would you help me with this? It can also be used for invitations or preferences or desires. I would like a cup of tea, or would you prefer apples or oranges? Then we have can. Can be used to show ability. I can speak English. It can also be used to suggest a possibility or give an option. For example, you can call him tomorrow. It can also be used to show impossibility. That can't be her. And it can also be used for a request. Can you help me? Could, on the other hand, can show past ability. I could do trigonometry 5 years ago. It can also be used to ask a polite question. Could I call you? It can also be used to show possibility and impossibility. She could be here or she couldn't be here. And it can also be used to make a suggestion. You could try doing this. Then we have should. Should is used to recommend. You should try this new bar. It can also be used to say what is correct or right. For example, we should deal with this right now. It can also be used for an uncertain prediction. He should be home soon, but I'm not sure. Shall. Shall can be used to make an offer. Shall I help you with that? It can also be used for confirmation. I shall meet you there at midnight. It can also be used for promises. You shall be the first person to know. Okay, so that was my very condensed video on modal verbs. So what can you do next? Well, firstly, your homework is to comment below with 3 sentences using modal verbs. I want 1 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, and 1 in the interrogative. And up until midnight, I will correct as many as possible, and then I would like you guys to correct each other. Don't forget to connect with me on all of my social media. Remember, I now upload lessons on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, so I will see you for another lesson very, very soon. Mwah!